Almos, also Almos or Almus, was, according to the uniform account of Hungarian chronicles, the first head of the loose federation of the Hungarian tribes from around 850. Whether he was the sacred ruler of the Hungarians, or the military leader is subject to scholarly debate. He apparently accepted the Khazar khagan suzerainty in the first decade of his reign, but the Hungarians acted independently of the Khazars from around 860. The 14th-century Illuminated Chronicle narrates that he was murdered in Transylvania at the beginning of the Hungarian conquest of the Carpathian Basin around 895. Ancestry. Anonymous. The unknown author of the Gesta Hungarorum, who wrote his historical romance around 1200 to 1210, states that Almos descended from the line of Attila the Hun. A late 13th-century chronicler, Simon of Khagan, wrote that Almos was of the Tyrol kindred. He also wrote of Attila the Hun's banner, which bore the image of the bird the Hungarians call Tyrol, identified as either a gerfalcon or a hawk. A bird has an important role in the legend about Almos's birth, which was preserved both by the Gesta Hungarorum and by the Illuminated Chronicle. The legend says that Almos's mother, already pregnant with him, dreamed of a bird of prey, which had the likeness of a hawk, impregnating her. Historians Gayula Christo and Victor Spine wrote that this story, which has close analogies in Turkish folklore, initially narrated the origin of Almos's family from a totemic ancestor. According to the Gesta Hungarorum, Almos was born to Emis, a daughter of Prince Julian. However, Christo writes that her name, containing the old Hungarian word for mother, may have been invented by Anonymous. The name of Almos's father is likewise uncertain because the Hungarian chronicles preserved it in two variants. Anonymous states that Ugyek was his name, but the 14th-century Illuminated Chronicle says that Elad, himself the son of Ugyek, was Almos's father. Christo says that both names may have been the chronicler's inventions, since Ugyek's name derives from the ancient Hungarian Ugy word, and Elad's name simply refers to an ancestor. Anonymous writes that Ugyek married Emis in 819. If this date is correct, Almos was born around 820. Although Anonymous makes a connection between the name of Almos and the Hungarian word for dream, many historians, including Andras Rónátás and Victor Spine, argue that his name is of Turkish origin. If the latter theory is correct, it has a meaning of the bought one. Almos's family may have also been of Turkish stock, but according to Victor Spine, a name's etymology does not always reflect its bearer's ethnicity. In the year of our Lord's incarnation 819, Ugyek took to wife in Dentlamoja the daughter of Prince Julian, called Emis, from whom he begot a son, who was named Almos. But he is called Almos from a divine event, because when she was pregnant a divine vision appeared to his mother in a dream in the form of a falcon that seemed to come to her and impregnate her, and made known to her that from her womb a torrent would come forth, and from her loins glorious kings be generated, but that they would not multiply in their own land. Because a dream is called Alom in the Hungarian language and his birth was predicted in a dream, so he was called Almos, or he was called Almos, that is holy, because holy kings and dukes were born of his line. Reign. Almos, according to Gesta Hungarorum, was freely elected by the heads of the 7 Hungarian tribes as their leader and master. Anonymous adds that to ratify Almos's election, the 7 chiefs swore an oath confirmed in pagan manner with their own blood spilled in a single vessel. Anonymous says that they also adopted the basic principles of the government, including the hereditary right of Almos's offsprings to his office and the right of his elector's descendant to have a seat in the prince's council. According to author Pal Engel, this report of the treaty by blood, which reflects its author's political philosophy rather than actual events, was often presented by Hungarian historians as the very first manifestation of modern parliamentary thinking in Europe up until 1945. In a sharply contrasting narrative from around 950, the Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII Porphyrogenitus states that instead of Almos, his son Arpad was the first supreme head of the Hungarian tribes, and that Arpad's election was initiated by the Khazar khagan. The emperor says the khagan sent an envoy to the voivodes after they had been forced by the Pechenegs to leave their dwelling places near the Khazar Khaganate and to settle in a new territory called Etelkoz. The khagan was planning to appoint one of the voivodes named Levedi to lead the Hungarian tribes to represent the khagan's interests. Although Levedi refused the khagan's offer, he proposed one of his peers, Almos or Almos's son Arpad, to the proposed new position. The khagan accepted Levedi's offer. Upon his initiative the Hungarians elected the first prince, but they preferred Arpad to his father. Gayula Christo and many other historians refute Porphyrogenitus's report of the omission of Almos in favor of his son, saying that the Tarul legend connected to Almos's birth proves his role as forefather of his dynasty. These historians say that the emperor's account is based on a report by one of Arpad's descendants named Termixu, who emphasized by this report of Arpad's election that only those descending from Arpad were suitable to lead the Hungarians. Other children of Almos were excluded. Andras Ronataz says that Constantine Porphyrogenitus preserved the memory of a coup d'état organized against Levedi kenned by Almos Gayula, who had his own son Arpad elected as sacred ruler in his opponent's place. A late 9th century Central Asian scholar, Abu Abdullah al-Jayhani, whose works were partially preserved in Ibn Rustas and other Muslim authors' books, mentions the existence of these two high officers among the Hungarians. He describes the Kend as the Hungarian sacred ruler and the Gayula as the military commander. Historians still debate which of the two officers was held by Almos. The Chagan said too, "We have invited you upon this account, in order that, since you are noble and wise and valorous and first among thee, we may appoint you prince of your nation, and you may be obedient to our word and our command." But he, in reply, made answer to the Chagan, "Your regard and purpose for me I highly esteem and express to you suitable thanks, but since I am not strong enough for this rule, I cannot obey you. On the other hand, however, there is a voivode other than me, called, and he has a son called, let one of these, rather, either that or his son, be made prince, and be obedient to your word." Quote. The Chagan was pleased at this saying, and gave some of his men to go with him, and sent them to thee. And after they had talked the matter over with the preferred that should be prince rather than his father, for he was of superior parts and greatly admired for wisdom and counsel and valor, and capable of this rule, and so they made him prince according to the custom, or canon, of the Khazars, by lifting him upon a shield. Christo says that Almos stood at the head of the Hungarian tribal confederation from around 850. Porphyrogenitus's narration says that he initially accepted the khagan's suzerainty. The Hungarians apparently achieved their independence around 860, since the earliest reports on the plundering raids in Central Europe were recorded thereafter. The Annals of St. Bertin mentions their incursion into Louis the German's realm in 862. Three tribes seceding from the Khazar Khaganate, together known by Porphyrogenitus as Khabar, also joined with the Hungarians in the 860s or 870s. Spine says that the memory of their arrival was preserved by Anonymous, who mentions the 7 dukes of the Cumans who subjected themselves to Prince Almos at Kiev. Anonymous writes of a war between the Hungarians and the Kievan Druze, ending with the victory of the Hungarians, who were commanded by Almos. The Russian primary chronicle refers to a Hungarian hill at Kiev in connection with the town's occupation by Oleg of Novgorod in 882. The same chronicle mentions a castle of Almos standing on the same hill. George Vernadsky says that this fortress had been named after Almos, but this theory has not been widely accepted by historians. The Hungarians who lived in the westernmost parts of the Pontic steppes were occasionally hired by neighboring powers to intervene in the wars. For instance, they invaded Moravia in alliance with Arnulf of East Francia in 892. Their intervention in a conflict between the First Bulgarian Empire and the Byzantine Empire caused a joint counter-invasion by the Bulgars and Pechenegs. The Hungarians were forced to leave the Pontic steppes and to cross the Carpathians in search of a new homeland around 895. According to the Gesta Hungarorum, the Hungarians invaded the Carpathian Basin under Almos, who appointed his son, Arpad, as leader and master of the Hungarian tribal federation at Ungva. Thereafter Anonymous does not mention Almos. In a contrasting report the Illuminated Chronicle says that Almos could not enter Pannonia, for he was killed in Erdl. Christo says that the chronicle preserves the memory of Almos's sacrifice because of the catastrophic defeat of his people by the Pechenegs. If this is true, his ritual murder proves that Almos was the sacred leader of the Hungarian tribal federation. Ronatas refutes this and says that if the chronicle's report is reliable, Almos became the victim of a political murder committed or initiated by his own son, preferring the narration of the Gesta Hungarorum to the report by the Illuminated Chronicle. Victor Spine states that Almos was not murdered in Transylvania, since Anonymous writes that the Hungarians bypassed this region when invading the Carpathian Basin. Family. No source preserved the name of Almos's wife. Anonymous writes that she was the daughter of a certain most noble prince. Almos's only child known by name was Arpad, who succeeded Almos after his death. The following is a family tree presenting Almos's closest relatives.